Mm. Just waiting for it to do its shift. There we go. Mm. So day 85 of 100 days of visibility. I'm feeling very grounded. There's definitely more to ground. Felt a lot of hesitation to hop on. I'm not afraid of being here exactly. There's a kind of distrust in my belly. Spent, um, aside from being asleep, a lot of the last, um, in the last 12 hours, my conscious time spent really just focusing on physical sensations. It's a type of grounding that some of the reason I'm having difficulty speaking clearly here is I've I watch how language pulls me out of the sensation and puts me into worlds. This is something that I know about, is in the mind. The mind has seemingly accurate models of it. This whole business of rooting in the body. Like, it's not a binary thing. It's not, is it rooted or not? Something like, how rooted is it? So I feel a temptation to share about my lived experience, the way that I'm getting more consciously in touch with the exact sensations of my body, feeling the organs, feeling the bones. And why that is, what I'm getting from it. And I feel a desire to share that. I notice, and actually I'm doing so as I speak, self-reference raises its head. The act of speaking and articulating pulls the energy up into my head where I have a model of what my experience has been. My experience right now is I'm feeling the vibration of my voice in my body, particularly ringing through my ribs. And now there's stillness until I spoke. There's a lot of here and now. And this is the lived experience. There's ease, there's relief. Over the last several hours, sometimes I'll notice a bubbling up coming from usually the belly. So far, it's almost always been the belly. A lot of pain and grief. It, it feels very different. If I imagine, it feels different from when my mind stimulates my body. It feels more like unlocking things that are there, giving them space to breathe. In particular, I feel a thing that my mind is starting to tag as, oh, this is about my relationship to desire. What is this? Well, at one point, after sitting and doing something I guess is equivalent to meditation, it's building a capacity, just being in my body really clearly. Feeling the sensations when my mind would drift off, just rubbing my legs. Feeling the breath moving around a little bit so that it's easier for me to bring my focus to these sensations in the body. After doing that for a while, I'm feeling a kind of peacefulness. I noticed a pain appearing in my belly. After a while, I laid on my side and cried. I could tell what that was about. I don't want to go into it right now, into the details of it, but that's for me. But I did have details come up. It felt very different from when I'll feel an uncomfortable body sensation and the energy will vent up to the mind, and then the mind runs a mechanism that stimulates the body, creating a distraction mechanism. I'm very familiar with that type of process. This is different. This felt more like there were energetic keys sitting in my belly, and as I opened up my belly and as I continued to be with it, some of those energetic keys would float up to the mind and unlock the association so that I could become conscious of what the pain is about. This is not a new concept even for me, this distinction. I don't focus on it as much. A lot of what I've talked about. I mostly focus on the mind-body loop. Learning to recognize that and watch it in real time has been incredibly helpful for me. And most of the value I've been getting in this grounding has just been being more present to what exactly all the tiny fluctuations actually are, now, and now, and now. There's this idea that I think is just correct. Of course I do. That's how ideas work. I think they are right, and I am thinking it, therefore it's right. It's something like the implicit logic of the mind. Is it consistent? That makes it true. Oh wait, that doesn't make sense. Well, let's add more factors into the thought structure, like the need for evidence. Once you add in the need for evidence, then does the loop between the logical thoughts and the idea of evidence, does that form a consistent pattern? Ah, that means that it is true. The mind has no idea what's true. That isn't its job. The mind's job is consistency. So, the mind, well, that's more how it does what it does. It creates consistent worlds. It creates hallucinations. This is a beautiful benefit. It's what lets me do fascinating moves like, oh, my girlfriend is near Paris. And that means that in order to go see her, I would have to navigate a bunch of transportation challenges, the situation with the pandemic, and border lockdowns. As far as I can tell right now, it's not possible, because France has a nope policy. Ah, you are American. No. Ce n'est pas possible. Okay. But none of that is present to my sense experience. My sense experience right now is the feeling in this chair and speaking as though I am speaking to someone. I don't see someone, I see a computer. Even that's not true. There's a mental projection there. It is hard to talk about what the lived experience is without the mind. The mind pulls out details. Without the mind, it's all unified oneness. It's just experience. It's reality. I don't even have a me. The concept of me separate from everything else is a concept. It's not just an experience. It's an experience of a concept. And to differing extents, I can sometimes experience this. A couple of days ago, I had a very clear experience of it, and I looked around with a sense of, oh, no more me. No more me. That determination got looped into the icon, and that's a little more messy. But all of that's in mind. So what makes the mind useful is the way that it can extend senses. The fact that it can be true that my girlfriend is near Paris, and that a certain path of action could lead me and her to get physically together. But what makes it useful is that it connects to physical actions. The lived experience of my body. How does my body feel right now? Not what could my body in theory do, that's more thought. I mean things like, oh, based on how my body feels right now, I don't have the sense of room to just like book a plane flight. I know how to move my fingers to the keyboard, but I'm currently engaged in a live stream. That gives a context for my lived experience. So this concept of what I could do is in a world that isn't connected to what my body is doing right now. But that distinction, recognizing, oh, that is a thought that is not relevant to my lived experience. And it's only partially true because I'm giving it as an example. But it's an example of a thought that, other than it being an example of this moment, is not connected to my lived experience in a meaningful way. So that split, all it can actually do is cause a sort of discomfort via the disconnect, via the not paying attention to, well, what is important right now? What is true right now? And how do I relate to that? I'm blinding myself a little bit by getting into a thought that has very little connection to this lived experience. I feel my mind buzzing. There's a piece of theory and excitement. Oh, there's this idea. It's a particular piece having to do with where control is. I am able, it would seem, to choose how to move my body when I'm paying attention. And this is the whole I can choose to move my finger. I can't choose to change my hair color in the same way. I have to come up with a plan and go through a process for that to happen. I need glasses to see at a distance. Even at this distance, it's a little, the screen is ever so slightly blurry. If I focus, I can bring it a little more into focus, but it's not sharp. Not the way that putting on glasses makes it. So I can feel the edges of what I can do and what I expect I can do in this moment. When I create an imaginary world, I can imagine being with my girlfriend. I can imagine getting on a plane and somehow, in some abstract way, getting through the border restrictions and then being able to go see her. That's something I can ask my mind to produce. but I have no clear sense of my physical connection, of my ability to move my body to enacting that vision, to embodying that vision. One bizarre solution that I watch my whole system producing as a result of years of habit and avoiding being really present with the things that are buried in the body, and not fully honoring my own lived desires in the present moment. One weird solution is to distance from the sensory experience of the body so that the experience of control in the mind feels like control. And then try to create some kind of distance from the lived experience of this, so that it's almost remote controlled. I think we can hear this kind of language a lot in the nerd rapture cluster. We talk about a technological singularity where we end up creating a absolute physical bounty. There's no longer any limitation because to what we can physically create, that any individual can physically create, because we can, like in terms of the things that we normally think of, like, hey, you want a new laptop of the finest design, well, you can just print it in your universal replicator using nanotech. If you don't know what any of that means, that's okay. And it's not important. The important part is that there's a way of envisioning what technology could do that creates this sort of magical, boundless world of abundance and physical ease and safety. You can't actually create that. That isn't how it works. Even if we were to somehow end up with those physical technologies, what that would do is amplify the power output of the subtle things that we haven't been addressing. How do you deal with, like sure, you could print a sex doll, but if you want to have a romantic connection with a human being, and they're not fulfilling your projections of desire in the way that you want, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with your own feelings? If that level has not been addressed, it doesn't, well, it does matter that there's utter control of the physical world, because all that does is imprint the immaturity of how to address your own feelings onto the world with more power. So the whole idea of being able to create a kind of physical utopia, even if it's not a social utopia, we don't know how to solve the politics, but you know what? Maybe if nobody ever goes hungry again, and everybody can have any physical item they want, and everybody has a kind of there is a proper term for this that Eric Drexler came up with, the person who coined the term nanotechnology. Think of it as the nano cloud, but basically you can, with certain kinds of intentions or commands, be able to build invisible bridges to walk over gaps and make yourself immune to collisions and fall from dramatic heights. You can be physically safe. We can repair the body from basically any kind of damage. You can have all of that. But only in a fantasy. The reason that we can't get there is not because it's not technologically feasible, but because the process of manifesting that has to be connected to what we can do right now. The answer, and this is just one version of a nerd rapture, and it's actually a fairly soft one. It's one that's kind of visualizable. The ones that I'm used to, the ones that talk about the technological singularity through an intelligence explosion. The thing that they mean by singularity there is beyond this horizon, you cannot actually fathom what it will look like, because it'll create a world that is practically designed to be beyond the capacity of your mind to imagine. The thing is that imagining those worlds and feeling them as real, for most people, at least that I have talked to, and this is definitely true of how I oriented to a lot of it when I was engaged in this kind of thinking over decades, it's not grounded in the lived experience of this breath. In these fantasy worlds, it feels meaningful. It feels like a kind of control to be able to imagine, hey, but like if we were able to come up with this kind of like mathematical twist, then we could make sure that this kind of benefit happens, and that would be amazing. Oh, we can, if we can make it so that the Republican Party can flip this attitude, or the Democrat Party can flip this attitude, or whatever. Like there's this living in a kind of abstraction of, oh, we can just create this shift and then things will be good because here is the logic, here's this imagining, great. So how do I make it happen? Well, normally we make things happen by putting in some kind of effort into making our bodies move. But if we're disconnected from our bodies, then it's very easy to transfer that to a sort of mental pressure. I used to hear about this as attempted telekinesis. This is the thing of you throw the basketball into the air and you go, come on, come on, come on, come on. You go in the basket, go in the basket. Okay, well, what's the tension for? Go in the basket. Oh. Attempted telekinesis, right? All those stupid people whose politics I disagree with. What's the tension doing? I can rationalize it afterwards. If I build up enough energy in my body and enough disapproval, then maybe this can signal with other people who agree with me, and we can apply a social pressure on the people who disagree so that there is some kind of social force that creates the sort of change that I want. But that's not why. That's a rationalization. That's not why the action was chosen. That's not why the attempted telekinesis was attempted. That is the answer to the question, how might it make sense for that kind of attempted telekinesis to somehow result in the change in the world that I want to see? It's a rationalization prompt. Actually look at the reasons. Where is the pressure coming from? Where is the... It's something almost like wanting to take this, and I experience it this way. I don't know how universal this one is. I haven't watched other people's minds closely enough to know. But the way I experience it is almost like I'm trying to take this imaginary world. And for me, my worlds look very different from the ones I usually hear, but same structure. And take this world and push it into the physical world. How do I push it? Oh, come on. You get this, right? Push. In Aikido, the martial art I used to practiced for about a quarter century, and I used to teach. So it's a quirky martial art in that it is based on peace and kindness and meditative stillness. The running ethos behind Aikido is, in a conflict, how do we neutralize the energy that could harm without harming anyone, including the assailant? How do we protect everyone from the energy that's arising? And how do we address that energy in a way that is safe? It's not as powerful a martial art as things like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in terms of going one-on-one who can beat whom. But it's a much more useful ethos in the lived day-to-day experience. One of the principles that I found myself wanting to express, which as I learn more about how power works, I'll probably want to change this phrase, but it's pointing at a real concept. The phrasing is power felt is power wasted. So this abstraction, how does it root in the body? Well, the experience of someone grabbing, if I'm using a lot of force to get around the arm, then all of the power that I'm feeling, all of the resistance that I'm feeling is energy I have to put into fighting them. Whereas if I can find the angle where there's almost no resistance and drop my elbow instead of trying to force my wrist to go around theirs. When somebody is punching, instead of trying to block the punch, if instead I can gently guide it off to the side and move with it. If as the person lunges, I can take their energy and move with them and then place them on the ground. I don't have to force, I'm just directing. There's ease. It's very, very powerful. But it doesn't feel powerful. It doesn't feel strong because it's not power versus another power trying to overpower. It is power applied with gentleness and understanding. I have a very clear sense of something like that being more than possible, something like it's the only way things get done without creating more suffering. I think the phrasing is off because you can feel power and it's not wasted. This is, I think, a misperception on my part when I was teaching. But there's still a truth to it. Everything that is rooted in the body and in what the body can do right now is easy. How do I say the next sentence? Easy. How do I how do I get a healthy body? Well, if that healthy body, I mean, my body is healthy, but I mean something like, how do I get up to being able to do 100 push-ups? I suspect that until this body goes through repairs, it's not going to get up to 100 push-ups again. So I had to get shoulder surgery, and one of the results of the shoulder surgery is that there's a type of damage where it's actually unhealthy for my body to go through a lot of intense workout that puts pressure on the joint backwards. It's just unkind to the body, and so the push-up is putting pressure exactly there. And I could be wrong, but my guess is that I don't actually have a lived pathway there, lived in kindness. I would have to disconnect from kindness, take an idea, focus on the idea, and move my body while ignoring the signals that it's giving me, like the clicking and clunking that happens in my shoulder. But if I want to, I can certainly get up to something like 20 push-ups. Right now I can do about 15. It feels very weird from, in some sense, like it's a little frictive with an image. I used to be able to do 100 push-ups. And I certainly exercise regularly. So it's kind of a funny limitation. But the lived experience of how to relate to that is not in, well, here is the plan. Like, that's more of mine. The question is, how does it relate to this right now? The honest answer is that it doesn't, because I'm not trying to do push-ups right now. It's seeing that clearly. Being here. This is the most actionable thing I can do if there is something I want to change about. Well, how do I build up to more push-ups? Well, the answer is I don't think about it right now. Instead of getting into imagining worlds where I'm doing thus and such plan, where the imagining in some sense feels like a kind of control, but it's not a control over manifestation, not in the physical world. It's control over thoughts. And even there, the control is tenuous. All of the power is in the relationship to what the body can do right now. Relating everything right back to this is where all the power is. So that's a lot of what I'm living right now, rooting it more deeply. None of this is new in terms of intellectual content. It's sort of like the difference between talking about how to do a technique or talking about doing push-ups versus practicing. That's it for today.